Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Battle video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the best team in Dokkan Battle, Earth Protecting Heroes slash Fuse Fighters, and I'm going to call it Fuse Fighters slash Pure Saiyans because the thing is, I think the double Gogeta lead is absolutely the best way to go. You can of course switch to the Tech Vegito lead if you want to. It is not a problem. They will both work for this team. It's just that the Gogeta team firstly runs at a higher base level because there's more to 50% health and to 20% attack and defense. Then on top of that as well, we also have the added benefit of what I believe is the better duo being a double Gogeta, because it gives us a utilization of a Ghost Usher if we need, even twice, and it lets us basically have an incredibly well-powered support-based lead. Now of course Vegito is just as good a lead. The difference between the team performance under Vegito or Gogeta, not too major. What I would say is if your team is lacking some of the big time damage dealers, if you're missing a 7th anniversary LR that you can see here, if you're missing anything like that, then you can definitely consider rather running 2 Vegitos, as that is a much higher DPS outcome because you can have a Vegito on each rotation, and that is still by far the highest DPS turn that any unit can put out, I believe. So let's talk obviously about the team. We have Gogeta, we have Vegito, we have the double 7th anniversary EZAs who are amazing. We have the AGL SS3 Goku, and of course we have, at least right now, the Tech Goku and Vegeta Angel, although you could very easily replace them with someone else, and I'll show you exactly who. Now, alternatives for this team. So just in general, good alternatives are units like MUI Goku. If you are in an evasion centric event, he's going to do an absolutely amazing job for you. Tech Broly is also a really good alternative. He's not that conditional. He won't hit as many links as maybe other units, but he is still really good, and there's no actual condition against him running on this team. He even runs at a pretty decent lead as well. Similarly with Vegeta, both of them are your tanking alternatives. If you're missing a 7th anniversary LR, then consider maybe using these guys. They're really good, they tank amazingly, and they're very consistent. Super Saiyan Goku is an outlier, and you can definitely consider putting him in. He isn't necessarily as good a first shot tank, but he is quite reliable and solid. Vegeta is the unit that will be subbing in for the Goku and Vegeta. The reason you choose between the two of them is quite simple. Vegeta gives you a revive, which is quite crucial. Goku and Vegeta give you 4C super attacks, which you can use before using your SS4 Gogeta. So it's just going to depend on what kind of playstyle or comfortability you have. I won't be using Vegeta as a first start tank, so you don't need him for that purpose. However, if you want to, you can. He is a little bit inconsistent, especially if there's crit or things like that, but post revive he's really strong, and he is still an amazing tank nonetheless. Now, in terms of other alternatives, of course, we have Super Gogeta, an amazing Fuse Fighters alternative who brings a taunt to the table and some really good scaling. He needs dupes to really run it as most effective, and he's probably a better alternative for one of the 7th anniversary LRs if you're using a tanky option like Vegeta or Broly. The 2 Super EZAs for Gogeta and Vegito are pretty solid, and both obviously fit under the lead to a good extent, but the big issue that you're going to face with either of them is consistency. Gogeta is consistent but just doesn't have the heights required for certain events, whereas Vegeta obviously always is never going to really handle the heat of a super attack. Gotenks is great for shorter events and still can thrive in longer events, but obviously there is a bit of an RNG element with him. He can even be a tank in certain events and certain situations, so he's one of my favorite alternatives to run in this team. if I feel like I need a bit of instant damage, early tanking potential, and just really want to kind of run that RNG centric. He's a great alternative to Vegeta, but he is far more positionally tied to the first slot than Vegeta is. So that is the team. Successes doesn't really have any alternatives for us. Earth Protecting Heroes would provide you with a little bit more if you were running, obviously, Vegito, but these are probably the only units right now I would consider running under either variant of the team in certain situations. Of course, we are getting more units. You could run into GT Heroes Goku. You could potentially run 2 of the GT EZAs that are coming up, but this is just how I feel. Now, obviously, before we talk about rotations and everything, let's just talk a little bit about support memories. The team is pretty consistent, but does have some gaps. For example, the 7th year anniversary LRs, although featuring both Goku and Vegeta, don't belong to either Goku or Vegeta's family. A healing item in the form of Bulma might be best, as it gives you health and a boost to a hybrid and pure Saiyans, which most of your team, if not all your team, will be. And of course, you could consider running just a flat passive support. Here, I would more than likely just consider the bond of parent and child, as it will apply to pretty much every unit underneath here, unless you have decided to go with a Broly or a pure fusion like Vegeta or Gogeta. Overall, you can run either of those, or just run whatever you're comfortable with. Now, let's go and talk about rotations. So now, in terms of rotations, generally speaking, there will be 2 set rotations. One is extremely set, so that is the physical SS4s and the AGL SS3. I don't have to explain to you in detail why, but I am going to. So the reason you want to run the SS4s alongside AGL SS3 is because Super Saiyan 4s have a link called Saiyan Raw, and a couple other links, but mainly Saiyan Raw, which is huge for them. 25% attack and 10% defense at max level, plus obviously the GT link, which is attack and defense of 10%. So from a linking standpoint, they have a lot more dependence on each other than other units. Secondly, obviously when AGL SS3 Goku transforms, he gives 10% damage reduction to units that are gigantic power or power beyond Super Saiyan. This is massive for Gogeta, who is already very tanky, but at extra 70% damage reduction and the extra, 70% defense and the extra 10% damage reduction is going to be, pretty helpful for Gogeta. The other rotation is going to depend a lot on what your team is currently running. So obviously, if you have all of the ideal units, you'll be running a Super Saiyan God's rotation alongside whichever unit you're happiest running them with. If you have dupes in Vegito, you might want to run him. Maybe you want to run a Gogeta. Whichever one you can take a look at is fine. Realistically, it's entirely up to whatever situation you're in. For me, personally, I keep Vegito mainly on rotation. It helps to build up his attack for his eventual massive active skills. It also allows me a little bit more of a set rotation. Gogeta as a unit, or the Goku Vegeta AGL, thrives a lot in their flexibility. And we'll talk a little bit now about the Usher effect and everything a little bit later on, but they can also run as a first slot tank, provided you use the Ghost Usher skill with Goku, which oftentimes I do when I'm feeling insecure or I'm feeling like I have a little bit of a tense situation. I'll often use a Ghost Usher. This will give me a free turn, and then make Goku be able to be a first slot tank for the Super Saiyan God boys, which I find to be amazing. Either way, it's entirely up to you. Vegeta can also slot in as a first slot tank, should he be required to, should the situation be needed. And obviously, if you don't have the 7th anniversary LRs, you will need to replace them with tanky options. So the reason we use the 7th year anniversary LRs as tanks is because in the majority of events, they start off absolutely immune to damage. And if they stack from their first turn, generally their stacking exceeds the events if you have a dupe or 2 in them. If you don't have a dupe in the 7th anniversary LRs, but you want to run a team similar to this, then rather substitute in for Int Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta, rather sub in a unit like Broly or Giant Ape Vegeta to take the slot rotation as a first slot tank for either 7th year anniversary that you don't have a dupe in. Vegeta can also take that heat, but in certain events he will drop off. Now, obviously, that's just discussing rotations. So why are we floating the two 10th anniversary LRs, and why are we keeping the 7th year anniversary LRs on rotation? Well, it's quite simple. The 7th year anniversary LRs stack alarmingly fast. With a dupe, they very often can exceed 1 million, 2 million, even 3 million defense by the time they transform. The 7th anniversary LRs also only have 7 turns of guaranteed guard. Vegito and Gogeta are powerful enough and flexible enough to be run as floaters or second slot units because they don't need those stacks to guarantee their defensive performance. They have a lot of other tools that they can use, whether it's ghost dashes, transformations, etc. For me, because of how I like to run my teams with set rotations, or at least set first slot tanks where necessary, I like to run the 7th anniversary LRs as those first slot units because they can stack fast enough. Of course, if that's not the case and an issue occurs, then the team is still flexible enough to adjust with slotting in a first slot unit like Vegeta, or using Ghost Dasher or active skills of Vegeta or Gogeta. This ultimately results in a very, very good, ultimately very powerful team. Now, of course, the real question is, I guess, Cole, what if I get in a situation where I'm in trouble? Well, that's what we'll talk about now. Now, the switching of the Tech Goku Vegeta and the switching of the AGL Goku Vegeta is absolutely crucial to your fundamental gameplay with this team. A lot of people discount the actives of the alternative sides. Everyone wants to have Gogeta, everyone wants to have Vegito, and I completely understand. For me, I find that the Tech Goku Vegeta is a lot more static than the Gogeta. The Tech Goku Vegeta, I tend to hold the Vegito skill, usually for the last phase or two, because I know the level of damage it can occur. However, you can still manage things a lot better between them. Goku, for example, has 10% less damage reduction than Vegeta, regardless of slot. So if you're looking to be more defensively minded, you're going to switch Vegeta in. Vegeta will also stack defense, which will allow him to have a higher defensive range. He will have 10% more damage reduction. And so generally I'll often switch to Vegeta because I know I'm trying to keep Vegito in that second slot to use his active skill when I'm feeling panicked. However, that doesn't mean everything's set in stone. For example, if I'm feeling unsafe, very often, especially if I'm floating the two Gogetas, I will use one of them for a Ghost Dasher skill. You're going to see this now, where I switch to obviously the Goku side of the Gogeta unit. And here's the thing. That Ghost Dasher skill is absolutely amazing for a lot of reasons. Firstly, it opens up the ability to skip the turn. This is something that is fundamentally immense for any team. Secondly, it turns Goku into a first slot tank for the next 3 turns. So like I mentioned previously, maybe I'm in a situation where I'm feeling unsure about the tanking capabilities of my 7th year anniversary LRs. Maybe the unit has a crit super, which will nullify their guard. Maybe the unit or the 7th year anniversary LR hasn't stacked enough. So what I do is I emergency the situation, I Ghost Dasher with Goku, and Goku will be an absolutely perfect tank for 3 turns, whilst building his defense and just being insanely immense. Obviously, if a boss disables evasion, that's not going to help you. But Goku is a great emergency tank that I have used time and time again to absolutely hold down the fort while I am in trouble. And you can see him here doing it without even using the active skill. This is him taking on Kefla, and he is more than fine in this situation. So yeah, Goku is obviously incredibly good. But the thing is, I find that the Gogeta I'm far more flexible with. I'll use the Ghost Usher, I'll switch him between Goku and Vegeta as needs must. For the Vegeta unit, I tend to leave him in that Vegeta state. If I'm feeling secure, so if there's not like a type disadvantage or something, very often I will switch back to Goku to get those offensive stacks. But generally speaking, I'll stay in Vegeta, just to secure that level of defense. Let's talk about the Giant Ape active skill. The Giant Ape active skill is pretty much use as you can, so use it ASAP. However, please consider alternative situations for the active skill. Transforming Goku is imperative because his transformed support is out of this world. It's a 10% damage reduction, it adds an extra category to his defensive support, it adds 2 turn support on his super, and allows him to stack attack and defense. But the thing is, you can use this active skill to maximize a lot of situations. Firstly, if you can use this active skill to finish a phase, it will guarantee that you start with Super Saiyan 4 Goku the very next turn, which is absolutely huge against a new enemy and phase that's coming up. On top of that as well, you have to remember that the turn number doesn't change. So this is a great way to finish phases and keep the guard mechanic on your SS4s whilst changing over. And finally, you can use the giant form to soak up incredibly dangerous attacks. If you want to, you can delay it one more turn. You really only need SS4 Goku when you have SS4 Gogeta. So you can delay it if you know there's going to be a big super that you're going to need to soak the damage up on. So now let's talk about our good friends SS4 Goku or Gogeta and the Super Saiyan God SS boys. Now I am going to be using the Ghost Usher of Goku. I've mentioned this already, but this ability is insane. A lot of people underestimate it. I understand why. But outside situations where defense or evasion is cancelled, this active skill is nuts. It is so good because of the fact that it frees you up to make big decisions. And here is the perfect situation to use it because we are in a dangerous situation. We have Jiren locking our characters in positions that aren't ideal. Now, the Super Saiyan God boys and SS4, you basically want to transform after 7 turns. If you can hold it one more turn because you're feeling very safe, you like the extra defensive stacks, you can. But generally with a dupe, at this point, these units are going to be absolutely insane. Like, insane. Once they transform. Like, they'll have 2.93 million defense. They get so many buffs after transforming. They get guard, they get evasion to a high level if they're the God boys, they get damage reduction to a higher level, and super nullification as Gogeta. They transformed are so good, and it's the offense that's the big kicker. As much as they both gain huge defensive powers, it's actually the offense that's massive. Of course, foreseeing super attacks, of course, being able to dodge everything, of course, being able to do all that really good defensive stuff is amazing. But it is the sheer offensive power of both transformations that is huge. It means your team can start to accelerate, and in the latter phases of fights, you will face enemies with 600 million health, 700 million health, and you have to beat these guys. Like, you have to get their health down. There's no way around it, and the only real way to do that is with Gogeta and the SS God boys. Now, of course, Gogeta can be used to soak supers. Gogeta is immense due to the fact that he can nullify pretty much any supers, and you can see where they're coming. So he is huge. I do think right now he's probably a bit better than the God boys, but at the same time, don't discredit the God boys. Their offense is huge. They'll do so much damage. And remember, you have their supers that you can utilize when enemies get below 55%. And both of these units still gain attack and defense by coming out a bit earlier. Don't be scared to just wait and use them for the last turn. Pop them out in that second to last phase, let them get nice and cozy, they're going to be fine. Your offensive gain is way better than stacking for one extra turn. But let's get to the real show. Obviously the highlight of any best team in the game build, and I don't think any team can be the best team in the game right now without discussing Gogeta and Vegito. And it's not just about the concept of the two of them running together, which, before I even talk about them separately, let's just talk about that. Running the two of them together is almost a guaranteed win condition. Should you get the active skill for Gogeta, and should you use it alongside the taunt capability of the Vegito, you will do so much damage in that turn that very, very few bosses, even from full, will be able to handle it. It is that insane, the level of damage. We're talking 27 million crit counters, for crying out loud. Now, Gogeta and Vegito are fundamentally different. Obviously, Gogeta, I've mentioned the Ghost Usher alternative. It's something you can consider using a lot more, I would say, than Vegeta's alternative right now for Vegito. The merit of having Vegeta have God all over the place and that extra defense is good, but honestly, the Vegito active skill outweighs it a lot. For Gogeta, he has a great active. It augments everyone, and you should try to use it. Don't feel the need to use it on the first turn unless you need extra defense crucially. Try to use it and sync it with any other unit's active skill. This thing combined with SS4 Gogeta, insane. This thing combined with the SS God Boys, insane. This thing combined with Vegeta's active, insane. He can tank, he removes seal, and he removes lock, and this is something that I think a lot of players forget. He removes negative conditions. It's a very mandatory, super powerful ability that he has. If you have a unit that's locked in place, Gogeta, boom, he can move, switch himself into there. If you are sealed, boom, Gogeta will remove the seal for himself. It's a very powerful ability, and it helps a lot just in keeping your rotation on lock. Now, Gogeta's great, but we need to talk about the unit with the highest DPS in the game. Gogeta is what I would say a very flexible, amazing unit, and I love him. I have him as number 1. But very easy you can have Vegito as number 1. In fact, most people do. And the reason is because this guy does damage for a living. There are 3 huge basic kind of things about him that make him amazing. The first, his DPS is insane. So his DPS is absolutely out of this world. Secondly, he taunts. So taunts are incredibly powerful because it's like a Ghost Usher kind of, but instead where you get attacked. Obviously in most situations this would not be ideal because what if I get supered? But with Vegito, due to his defense being where it is, during the turn, especially of his active skill, you are almost pretty much guaranteed to not die from anything, I think. So, at least right now. So, because of that, it's actually incredibly easy to kind of benefit from Vegito and have him just shuck out huge damage. Then, of course, on top of all of that, we have the added benefit of him being an absolute powerhouse when it comes to synergy. Because of how he works, he isn't, so like for example, when I talk about using taunts, Beast Gohan, when you use his taunt, you want to put him in the 2nd or 3rd slot because the more attacks he receives, the higher his damage levels. Vegito is completely different. He wants to super first. So with that, you can stick him in the 1st slot. I know it's a taunt, but it's actually more important to stick him in the 1st slot. You want him to super as early as possible to maximize those counters, to do big damage. Vegito is amazing. Gogeta is amazing. And this team, believe it or not, is amazing. For me, the big crushing ability that this team has, and why I like it so much, is flexibility. The 7th year anniversary LRs can move around. Gogeta and Vegito can move around. Yes, you might have to use actives here or there that maybe you didn't want to, but they can move. They can shift positionally Vegeta can shift positionally, you've got a revive, you've got transformations, you've got heals, you've got 4C or super attacks, you've got a ton of useful abilities. And I think for me, that is what makes this team, at least in my estimate, run better than any other team. It is so flexible in its options, and in its build, and in its design, and in how you use all the skills. And flexibility right now, the way bosses work, is crucial.